The charcoal stick trembled in Violet Preston's hand as she stared at the valley before her. The exact landscape she had sketched 100 times from memory alone, spread before her eyes like a dream made manifest. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Philadelphia to this remote corner of Montana Territory in the autumn of 1878, driven by visions that had plagued her since childhood. And now here it stood, real as the ground beneath her boots. The ranch house sat exactly where she had always drawn it, a sturdy timber structure with a wide porch facing east to catch the morning sun. The barn stood to the north, weathered red paint peeling in the same pattern she had inexplicably sketched years before ever setting foot in this territory. The creek wound through the property in lazy curves she could trace with her eyes closed, and the mountains rose behind it, all like ancient sentinels keeping watch over this isolated valley. Her hands moved across the paper with practiced urgency, desperate to capture everything before the late afternoon light shifted. She had ridden out from the small settlement of Trinity that morning, following nothing but instinct, and the images burned into her mind. The elderly woman at the boarding house had looked at her strangely when Violet asked about ranches to the west, had muttered something about foolish Eastern girls and their romantic notions, but Violet had pressed on anyway. Now, sitting on a sun-warmed boulder at the edge of the property, she worked to reconcile the impossible reality before her. How could she have known this place existed? How had she drawn it in such precise detail from 3,000 miles away, in a city where the closest thing to wilderness was the carefully manicured public gardens? The sound of approaching hoofbeats shattered her concentration. Violet looked up to see a rider coming toward her at a steady pace, and her heart lurched with the sudden realization that she was trespassing on private land. She stood quickly, clutching her sketchbook to her chest, prepared to offer apologies and explanations that would sound utterly mad to any reasonable person. The man who dismounted before her stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway and hands that looked capable of breaking fence posts in half. Dark hair fell past his collar beneath a well-worn hat, and his face bore the weathered complexion of someone who spent every day under the Montana sun. His eyes, she noticed with a strange flutter in her chest, were the exact shade of blue-gray she had mixed countless times trying to capture the color of the creek in winter. "You are on private property, miss." His voice carried a natural authority but lacked outright hostility. "This ranch belongs to me, and I do not recall giving anyone permission to sketch it." Violet felt heat rush to her cheeks. "I apologize. I know how this must look. I should have asked permission first, but I did not know who owned this land and I had to see if it was real." He tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. She had been traveling for weeks, and her practical brown traveling dress was dusty from the road. Her dark hair, which she had attempted to pin into a respectable bun that morning, had begun escaping in wild tendrils around her face. "If what was real?" he asked, his tone shifting from stern to curious. Violet hesitated, knowing how insane the truth would sound. "This place, your ranch. I have been dreaming of it for years, drawing it. I came west to find it, though I had no idea if it truly existed or if I was chasing phantoms." The cowboy's expression remained carefully neutral, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or concern that he had encountered a madwoman on his property. He held out his hand in a gesture that seemed more automatic than warm. "Vincent Whitmore," he said. "I have owned this ranch for 5 years now, built most of it with my own hands." She shook his hand, feeling the calluses rough against her palm. "Violet Preston. I am an artist from Philadelphia. I know how extraordinary this must sound, Mr. Whitmore, but I have been drawing this exact landscape since I was 12 years old. The placement of your house, the curve of the creek, even the way the mountains sit on the horizon. I had no logical reason to believe it existed anywhere but in my imagination, yet here it stands. Vincent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He glanced past her toward the boulder where she had been sitting, and she saw his gaze land on her sketchbook. "May I see what you have drawn?" Violet handed over the book with trembling fingers, watching his face as he flipped through page after page of drawings. She had filled dozens of sketchbooks over the years, but this one contained only studies of the ranch and the valley surrounding it. Different seasons, different times of day, different angles and perspectives, all of a place she had never seen until this morning. Vincent's hands stilled on a particular page, and the color seemed to drain from his face. "When did you draw this one?" Violet leaned closer to see which sketch had affected him so strongly. It showed the ranch house at night, warm light spilling from the windows, a figure standing on the porch looking out toward the mountains. She had drawn it 2 years ago, during a particularly vivid dream. "The winter of 1876, she said quietly. "I remember because I woke from the dream weeping, though I could not explain why. There was such loneliness in that figure on the porch, such longing for something lost." Vincent closed the sketchbook with care and handed it back to her. His eyes, when they met hers, held an emotion she could not quite name. "My wife died in the winter of 1876. She had been ill for months, and there was nothing the doctor could do. I used to stand on that porch every night after she passed, looking out at the mountains, wondering why I continued building a life in this valley when the person I built it for was gone." The words hung between them like a physical presence. Violet felt gooseflesh rise on her arms despite the warmth of the afternoon. "I am so sorry for your loss. I cannot imagine the pain you endured." 3 years is a long time," Vincent said, though his voice carried the weight of grief not fully healed. "I have made my peace with it, as much as any man can. But what you are telling me about these dreams and drawings, I do not know what to make of it." "Neither do I," Violet admitted. "I have no explanation that makes rational sense. My parents thought I had an overactive imagination. My tutors suggested I focus on more conventional subjects. But no matter what I did, these visions continued. They grew stronger as I got older, more insistent. Finally, I could not ignore them any longer. I had to know if this place existed." Vincent removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that struck her as deeply human and vulnerable. "You traveled all this way based on dreams and drawings. That took considerable courage, Miss Preston, or considerable foolishness." "Perhaps both," Violet said, managing a small smile. "My parents certainly think it foolishness. They wanted me to marry a banker's son and settle into a proper Philadelphia life. Instead, I took my inheritance from my grandmother and bought a train ticket west. Your family must be worried sick about you. I wrote them from every major stop along the way. They know I am safe, if not pleased with my choices." Violet glanced back at the ranch, drinking in the details. "Seeing it here before me, real and solid, I know I made the right decision. Even if I cannot explain why this place called to me across such distance." Vincent studied her for a long moment, and she had the distinct impression he was weighing some internal decision. Finally, he settled his hat back on his head and gestured toward his horse. "It is getting late, and Trinity is a good hour's ride from here. You should not be traveling alone after dark. There are wolves in these hills, and worse. I have a housekeeper who keeps a room ready for unexpected guests. You are welcome to stay the night, and I will take you back to town in the morning." Violet knew she should decline. that accepting such an invitation from a stranger was wildly inappropriate by any measure of civilized society. But something in her bones told her this was why she had come, that crossing paths with Vincent Whitmore was no accident, no matter how impossible the circumstances. "I would be grateful for the hospitality," she said. "Thank you." They rode back to the ranch house together. Vincent on his sturdy bay gelding and Violet on the gentle mare she had rented from the livery in Trinity. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the valley in shades of amber and rose that seemed to set the grasslands on fire. Violet tried to commit every detail to memory, knowing she would want to capture this light in her work. The housekeeper turned out to be a weathered woman of perhaps 50 years, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded Violet of her own grandmother. Her name was Martha Hayes, and she had worked for Vincent since shortly after his wife's death. "Company is rare out here," Martha said, showing Violet to a small but comfortable room on the second floor. "Vincent keeps mostly to himself these days. Works himself half to death running this ranch, if you ask me, though he did not ask me." The room was simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a washstand, but someone had placed fresh wildflowers in a jar on the windowsill. Violet moved to the window and looked out over the valley, watching the last light fade from the sky. "Mrs. Hayes," Violet said carefully. "What was she like?" "Vincent's wife," Martha's expression softened. "Sarah was a gentle soul, kind to everyone she met. She and Vincent were childhood sweethearts, married young and full of dreams. This ranch was those dreams made real, or starting to be. Her illness came on sudden, a fever that turned to something in her lungs that would not leave. She fought hard, but some battles cannot be won with fighting alone. He must have loved her very much. Still does, in his way," Martha said. "But grief becomes a habit if you let it. Vincent has been alone long enough, I think, maybe too long." She gave Violet a meaningful look that suggested the housekeeper saw more than she let on. "Supper will be ready in half an hour. Come down when you are ready." Dinner was a simple affair of roasted chicken, potatoes, and vegetables from Martha's garden. They ate at a large wooden table in the ranch house kitchen, the kind of table built to seat a large family, though only 3 of them gathered around it now. Vincent had washed and changed into a clean shirt, and Violet noticed the care he took with his appearance despite living so far from society. "Tell me about Philadelphia," Vincent said, passing her a bowl of green beans. "I have never been farther east than St. Louis." Violet described the city as best she could. The narrow streets and brick buildings, the constant noise and motion, the way the air always smelled of coal smoke and horses. She told him about the art academy where she had studied, the galleries and museums, the society functions she had been expected to attend. "It sounds crowded," Vincent observed. "It is, sometimes suffocatingly so. I used to escape to the public gardens whenever I could, just to see something green and growing. But even there, you could never truly be alone. There were always other people, always eyes watching and voices commenting." "And you do not miss it?" Violet considered the question honestly. "I miss my younger sister. I miss certain conveniences, I suppose. But no, I do not miss the city itself. From the moment I stepped off the train in Montana, I felt like I could breathe properly for the first time in my life." Martha excused herself after dinner to attend to some task in another part of the house, leaving Vincent and Violet alone in the kitchen's warm lamplight. An easy silence settled between them, comfortable in a way that seemed improbable given they had met only hours before. "May I ask you something that has been troubling me?" Vincent said finally. "Of course. In all your drawings of this place, did you ever see other people? Or was it always empty, Violet thought back through years of sketches and dreams. There were sometimes figures in the distance, too far away to make out clearly. And that one drawing of you on the porch, though I did not know it was you at the time. Why do you ask? Vincent stood and walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. Because I have dreamed of you as well, Miss Preston. Not for years as you have dreamed of this place, but recently. These past few months, I have had recurring dreams of a dark-haired woman standing in my valley, looking at the ranch as though she recognized it. I could never see her face clearly, but I felt as though I knew her, as though I had been waiting for her. Violet's breath caught in her chest. That is not possible. Neither is you drawing this ranch in perfect detail from thousands of miles away, yet here we are. He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her heart ache. I am not a fanciful man, Miss Preston. I believe in hard work and tangible things, but I cannot deny what I have experienced any more than you can deny your visions. What do you think it means? Violet asked, though part of her already knew the answer, had perhaps always known it. I think perhaps some things are meant to be, regardless of distance or circumstance. I think perhaps you were meant to find this place, and I was meant to be here when you did. Vincent moved back toward the table, his steps careful and measured. I know how that sounds. We have known each other less than a day. You are an educated woman from society, and I am a rancher who spends most of my time with cattle and horses. You are also a man who built a life in this beautiful valley, who loved his wife deeply enough that her loss echoed across a continent. Violet stood to face him properly. I did not travel 2,000 miles seeking conventional wisdom or societal expectations, Mr. Whitmore. I came seeking truth, whatever form it might take. They stood there in the lamplight, the air between them charged with possibility and the weight of impossible connections. Finally, Vincent broke the silence. It is late, and you must be exhausted from your journey. We can talk more in the morning when our heads are clearer. Violet nodded, though she doubted sleep would come easily with so many questions spinning through her mind. She bid him good night and climbed the stairs to her borrowed room, where she spent hours sitting by the window, looking out at the valley bathed in starlight, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Morning came with brilliant sunshine, and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. Violet dressed quickly and descended to find Martha already preparing breakfast while Vincent sat at the table reviewing what appeared to be ranch accounts. "Good morning," Violet said, feeling suddenly shy in the clear light of day. Vincent looked up and the warmth in his eyes chased away her uncertainty. "Good morning, Miss Preston. I hope you slept well." "Well enough, thank you." She accepted a cup of coffee from Martha and took a seat across from him. "I was thinking, if the offer still stands, I would very much like to spend the day sketching around the ranch. There is so much here I want to capture properly, now that I can see it with my own eyes." "The offer stands," Vincent said. "In fact, I need to ride out to check the northern fence line this morning. You are welcome to accompany me if you like. The views from up there are worth seeing." They set out after breakfast, with Violet mounted on the same gentle mare and Vincent on his bay. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of sage and pine. As they rode, Vincent pointed out various features of the ranch, explaining his plans for expansion, the challenges of raising cattle in Montana's harsh winters, the slow but steady progress he had made over the years. Violet listened, fascinated by the quiet passion in his voice when he spoke about the land. This was not just a business to him, she realized. It was a calling, a way of life he had chosen deliberately and defended with daily labor. They reached the northern fence line by mid-morning and dismounted to let the horses graze while Vincent inspected the posts and wire. Violet found a comfortable spot on a flat rock and opened her sketchbook, her hands moving almost of their own accord as she captured the sweep of the valley below. "You are very talented," Vincent said, coming to stand behind her. She had not heard him approach, and his nearness sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. "Thank you. Art has always been my truest language. I can express things with charcoal and paper that I struggle to say with words." "What are you expressing now?" Violet looked at her drawing, seeing not just the landscape but the emotion she had poured into every line. "Joy, I think. A sense of rightness, of being exactly where I am meant to be." Vincent sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I have not felt that way in a long time, not since Sarah died. This ranch became a burden to bear rather than a dream to build. I kept working because work was all I knew to do, but the joy had gone out of it. And now," Violet asked softly, "now I find myself seeing it through your eyes, remembering why I fell in love with this valley in the first place." He looked at her directly, his blue-gray eyes intense. "You have been here less than a day, Miss Preston, and already you have reminded me what it feels like to look forward rather than back." Violet set aside her sketchbook and turned to face him fully. "I must confess something. Last night, lying awake in that room, I realized that all these years of dreaming about this place, I was not just seeing the landscape. I was feeling an emotion attached to it, a sense of home, of belonging. I thought it was about the physical location, but now I wonder if it was about the person who would show me this place. If somehow I have been dreaming of you as much as I was dreaming of your ranch." The words hung between them, bold and undeniable. Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The simple gesture felt impossibly intimate. "I have no right to ask this of you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You have a life waiting for you back east, family and opportunities I cannot offer you here. But I find myself hoping, against all reason, that you might consider staying, not just for a few days, but for longer, long enough for us to understand what this connection between us means." Violet's heart hammered in her chest. Every rational part of her mind screamed that this was madness, that she barely knew this man, that she could not append her entire life based on dreams and a single day's acquaintance. But the deeper truth, the one that resonated in her bones, was that she had been moving toward this moment her entire life. "I have nowhere I need to be," she said, watching hope kindle in his eyes. "My inheritance is enough to support me for some time, and I can wire my parents to let them know I am extending my stay in Montana. I would very much like to remain here, to see where this path leads." Vincent smiled then, a genuine expression of joy that transformed his entire face. "I cannot promise comfort or luxury. Life on a ranch is hard work, and winters here are brutal. But I can promise honesty and respect, and the chance to build something real together." "That sounds like exactly what I have been searching for," Violet said. They sat together on that high ridge for another hour, talking about everything and nothing, learning the basic facts of each other's lives while navigating the strange familiarity that pulsed between them. Vincent told her about growing up in Missouri, about heading west with Sarah to build a new life, about the back-breaking work of establishing the ranch. Violet shared stories of her childhood in Philadelphia, her frustration with society's expectations, her determination to forge her own path, even when everyone told her she was being foolish. The sun had climbed high overhead when they finally remounted and headed back toward the ranch house. As they rode, Violet found herself studying Vincent's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the capable way he sat his horse. He caught her looking and grinned, and she felt heat rush to her cheeks even as she smiled back. The following days fell into an easy rhythm. Violet would wake early and join Vincent and Martha for breakfast, then spend her mornings exploring different areas of the ranch with her sketchbook. Sometimes Vincent would accompany her, showing her his favorite spots and sharing the history of the land. Other times she would venture out alone, soaking in the vast silence and dramatic beauty of the Montana landscape. Afternoons, she often helped Martha with various tasks around the house, learning to churn butter and preserve vegetables and mend work shirts worn through at the elbows. The older woman seemed pleased to have another female presence on the ranch, and she shared stories about the early days when Sarah was still alive. "She would have liked you," Martha told Violet one afternoon as they worked together rolling out pie dough. Sarah was artistic too, though her medium was fabric rather than paper. She could create the most beautiful quilts from scraps of nothing. Vincent still has several of them stored away, too precious to use. Evenings were Violet's favorite time. After supper, she and Vincent would sit on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, talking about their hopes and dreams. He told her about his plans to expand the herd, to build a better barn, to eventually hire help so the ranch could grow. She described paintings she wanted to create, capturing the wild beauty of Montana in ways that would make people back east understand why someone would choose this harsh land over civilized comfort. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after her arrival, Vincent reached over and took her hand as they sat watching the stars emerge. The gesture felt natural, inevitable. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "I have been trying to find the right words, but I am not sure such words exist." Violet squeezed his hand encouragingly, her pulse quickening. "When Sarah died, I thought my capacity for love had died with her. I believed I would spend the rest of my life alone, going through motions but never truly living again, and I was content with that, or at least resigned to it." He turned to face her, his eyes catching the lamplight from inside the house. "But then you appeared in my valley, having dreamed your way across a continent to find a place you should not have known existed, and everything I thought I knew about my life shifted." "Vincent," Violet breathed, but he shook his head gently. "Let me finish, please. I have been falling in love with you since the moment I saw you sitting on that boulder with your sketchbook, so fierce and certain despite being completely out of place. These past 2 weeks have only deepened what I feel. You challenge me, inspire me, make me want to be better than I am. You have brought light back into this house, into my life." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles softly. "I am asking if you might consider making this your permanent home, not as a guest, but as my wife." Violet felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you. I have been falling in love with you too, perhaps for far longer than I realized. Every dream I had of this place was leading me to you." Vincent pulled her close then, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. It was not the passionate, consuming kiss of romantic novels, but something deeper and more profound. A promise, a beginning, a recognition of the improbable journey that had brought them together. They sat together under the stars for hours, making plans and sharing kisses, speaking of the future with an excitement neither had felt in years. Eventually, Martha appeared in the doorway and cleared her throat meaningfully. "If there are announcements to be made, I would appreciate being included," she said, though her eyes sparkled with knowing amusement. "We are getting married," Violet said, beaming. Martha's stern expression cracked into a genuine smile. "About time. I have been watching you two dance around each other for days, wondering when you would finally admit what was obvious to everyone else. Congratulations to you both." The next morning, Vincent rode into Trinity to speak with the circuit preacher about performing a ceremony. Violet used the time to write a long letter to her parents, knowing they would struggle to understand her decision, but determined to help them see how right this felt. She described Vincent honestly, his character and kindness, the life they would build together. She explained about the dreams, knowing they would think her mad but feeling they deserved the truth. Vincent returned with news that the preacher could perform the ceremony in 3 weeks' time, giving them enough time to make preparations, and for word to spread to the few neighboring ranchers and townspeople who might wish to attend. Those 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Violet rode into Trinity several times with Martha, purchasing fabric to make a simple but elegant wedding dress. She had never been particularly skilled with a needle, but Martha proved to be an excellent teacher, and together they created a gown of soft cream cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Vincent threw himself into improving the ranch house, making repairs and improvements he had long postponed. He built Violet a proper studio in one of the unused rooms upstairs, installing large windows to capture the northern light and constructing sturdy shelves for her supplies. When he showed her the finished space, Violet wept with gratitude at his thoughtfulness. In the evenings, they continued their habit of sitting on the porch, but now they spoke of more practical matters. They discussed how to combine their lives, what traditions to keep and what new ones to create. Vincent was honest about the challenges she would face, the isolation and hard work, the long winters when they might not see another soul for weeks. Violet listened to all of it and remained undaunted. "I have lived my whole life surrounded by people and utterly lonely," she told him. "I would rather face Montana winters with you than spend another season in Philadelphia society." The wedding day arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp and clear. The ceremony took place at the ranch, with guests gathering in the front yard beneath the vast Montana sky. There were perhaps 30 people in attendance, neighboring ranchers and their families, a few merchants from Trinity, Martha, of course, and the circuit preacher. Violet wore her cream dress with her hair loose down her back, woven through with wildflowers Martha had gathered that morning. Vincent wore his best suit, slightly worn but clean and pressed, and the look on his face when he saw Violet walking toward him made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. The ceremony itself was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged traditional vows, promising to love and honor each other through all of life's challenges. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Vincent kissed her, Violet felt a sense of absolute rightness settle over her. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful. Martha had prepared enough food to feed everyone twice over, and someone produced a fiddle, filling the valley with music. Violet danced with Vincent under the open sky, laughing as he admitted he had never been much of a dancer, but was willing to try for her. As the sun began to set and guests started taking their leave, a weathered rancher named Tom Sullivan approached the newlyweds. He had been among the first settlers in the area and knew everyone within 100 miles. "Congratulations to you both," he said warmly. "Vincent, you are a lucky man to have found such a bride. Mrs. Whitmore, I hope you will be very happy here." "Thank you," Violet said, still getting used to hearing herself called Mrs. Whitmore. "I must say," Sullivan continued, "there is something familiar about you, though I am certain we have never met. You remind me of someone, though I cannot place who." Violet and Vincent exchanged glances. They had decided not to share the story of Violet's dreams with most people, knowing how strange it would sound. "Perhaps I just have one of those faces," Violet said lightly. Sullivan shook his head. "No, it is more than that. The way you move certain expressions." It is almost like looking at Sarah again, though you look nothing alike." He caught himself, looking embarrassed. "Forgive me, that was inappropriate to mention today." But Vincent's expression had turned thoughtful. "Do not apologize, Tom. I have noticed the similarity myself, though it is difficult to articulate. Not in appearance, but in spirit, perhaps. A certain gentleness combined with determination." After Sullivan left, Vincent pulled Violet close. "Does it bother you being compared to Sarah?" Violet considered the question carefully. "No, I do not think so. She was clearly a remarkable woman, and you loved her deeply. I am not trying to replace her or compete with her memory, but perhaps in some way I do not fully understand we were meant to be connected. Perhaps all these impossible dreams and visions were leading not just to you, but to completing something she left unfinished. Building a life in this valley," Vincent said softly. "Creating a true home here. That was always her dream, our dream together. But she did not live to see it fully realized. Then perhaps we can honor her by finishing what she started," Violet suggested. "Not erasing her presence, but building upon the foundation she helped create." Vincent kissed her forehead tenderly. "Have I mentioned yet today how remarkable you are?" "Not in the last hour, at least." "A terrible oversight on my part." They stood together watching the last of their guests depart, waving goodbye until the final wagon disappeared down the valley road. Martha had already retreated to her small cabin behind the main house, giving the newlyweds privacy. The ranch fell quiet except for the eternal wind and the distant sound of cattle settling for the night. Vincent took Violet's hand and led her inside, up the stairs to the bedroom they would now share. Someone, likely Martha, had placed fresh flowers on the dresser and turned down the bed. Moonlight streamed through the window, bathing everything in silver light. "Are you nervous?" Vincent asked, his voice gentle. "A little," Violet admitted. "But not afraid. Never afraid, not with you." He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her slowly, thoroughly, as though they had all the time in the world. And they did, Violet realized. They had the rest of their lives to explore this love that had called across impossible distances to bring them together. The next morning, Violet woke to find Vincent already dressed, sitting in a chair by the window and watching her sleep. When he saw her eyes open, he smiled. "Good morning, wife." "Good morning, husband." Violet stretched languorously, feeling wonderfully content. "What time is it?" "Early still. The sun is just coming up. I did not want to wake you, but I could not seem to leave this room." Violet sat up, pulling the quilt around her shoulders against the morning chill. "What were you thinking about?" "How my life has changed in just 1 month. How empty this room felt before you came into it." He moved to sit on the edge of the bed, taking her hand. "How grateful I am that you had the courage to follow your dreams across a continent. I am grateful you had the grace to welcome a trespassing stranger rather than simply sending her away. I do not think I could have sent you away if I had tried. From the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you." They spent the morning in bed, talking and laughing and making love with the unhurried leisure of newlyweds. Eventually, hunger drove them downstairs, where Martha had left bread and preserves for them before heading into town for supplies. The weeks following their wedding settled into a comfortable pattern, as Violet adapted to life as a rancher's wife. The work was indeed hard, as Vincent had warned, but she found satisfaction in the tangible results of her labor. She learned to cook proper meals, to tend the vegetable garden, to help with smaller ranch tasks. Her hands, once soft and used only to holding charcoal and brushes, developed calluses and strength, but Vincent made sure she never abandoned her art. On days when the weather permitted and ranch work allowed, they would ride out together to different locations, and Violet would sketch while Vincent worked on repairs or checked on cattle. She began creating a series of paintings documenting their first year together, capturing the changing seasons across the valley. Winter arrived in late November with a vengeance, just as Vincent had warned it would. Snow piled high around the ranch house, and temperatures plunged low enough to make simple tasks feel heroic. But Violet discovered she did not mind the isolation as much as she had feared. With Vincent and Martha for company, with her art to occupy her days and long evenings by the fire to warm her nights, she felt more content than she had ever been in crowded Philadelphia. One evening in January, as a blizzard raged outside and they sat close to the fireplace, Violet realized her monthly courses were late. She said nothing immediately, wanting to be certain before raising Vincent's hopes, but as days turned to weeks and other familiar signs appeared, she could no longer deny the possibility. She chose a quiet Sunday afternoon to tell him after they had returned from checking on the horses in the barn. They stood in the kitchen, warming themselves with coffee, when Violet decided she could not wait any longer. "Vincent, I need to tell you something." He must have heard something in her voice because he set down his cup immediately and gave her his full attention. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right. I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Vincent simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then his face broke into the most beautiful smile Violet had ever seen. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides and swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her in a circle. "Truly, you are certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor's confirmation, but yes, I am quite sure. I have missed 2 monthly courses, and I have been sick in the mornings, and certain smells that never bothered me before now make me queasy." Vincent set her down carefully as though she had suddenly become fragile. His hands moved to rest on her still flat stomach, his eyes full of wonder. "A baby, our baby. I never thought I would have this chance again." "Did you and Sarah want children?" Violet asked gently. "Very much. We tried for years, but it never happened for us. The doctor said sometimes it just does not, and we should be grateful for what we had. We were making peace with that when she fell ill." He looked up at Violet, and she saw tears shining in his eyes. "This feels like a gift I do not deserve but will cherish with everything I am." "You deserve every happiness," Violet said firmly, framing his face with her hands. "You deserve love and family and a future full of hope. We both do." They told Martha the news that evening over dinner, and the housekeeper's reaction was as enthusiastic as Vincent's had been. She immediately began planning, talking about converting one of the spare rooms into a nursery and knitting baby clothes, and all the preparations that would need to be made. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, Violet's body began changing in visible ways. Her belly swelled gradually, and she felt the first fluttering movements of the baby in March. Every milestone filled her with equal parts wonder and terror. She was far from any major medical facilities, and the nearest doctor was in Trinity, a journey that could take hours in good weather and might be impossible in bad. But Vincent and Martha did everything possible to ease her fears. They brought in the doctor from Trinity to examine her in her 4th month, and he pronounced both mother and baby healthy. Martha had assisted with many births over the years and assured Violet she would be in capable hands when the time came. Spring brought renewed energy to the ranch. The snow melted, revealing the valley in all its wild beauty. Violet spent hours in her studio, working on a special painting she had been planning for months. It showed the ranch house at sunrise, with Vincent on the porch and herself beside him, her hand resting on her swollen belly. In the background, barely visible, she had painted what she thought might be Sarah's spirit, watching over them with approval and blessing. When she showed the finished painting to Vincent, He stood before it for a long time without speaking. Finally, he pulled her close and held her, and she felt his tears wet against her hair. "It is perfect," he whispered. "Exactly perfect." Summer arrived hot and bright, and Violet's pregnancy advanced into its final stages. Moving became uncomfortable, and she found herself grateful for Martha's help with daily tasks. Vincent hovered protectively, doing everything he could to make her comfortable despite her laughing protests that she was pregnant, not dying. In late July, as the evening sun painted the mountains gold and rose, Violet felt the first unmistakable pains of labor. Martha sent Vincent to fetch the doctor from Trinity while she helped Violet into bed and began preparing everything they would need. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the following day. Vincent returned with the doctor just after dawn, and Violet had never been so grateful to see anyone in her life. The pain was unlike anything she had experienced, waves of agony that made her wonder if she would survive it. But Martha held her hand and spoke encouraging words, and Vincent stayed by her side despite the doctor's suggestion that he might prefer to wait downstairs. And finally, just as the sun reached its zenith on a blazing July afternoon, Violet gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Samuel Vincent Whitmore, and from the moment Violet held him in her arms, she understood a depth of love she had not known existed. He had Vincent's dark hair and what would likely be her green eyes, and he was absolutely perfect. Vincent wept openly when he held his son for the first time, cradling the tiny bundle with infinite care. "Thank you," he kept saying to Violet. "Thank you for this gift for our beautiful boy." "Thank us both," Violet said tiredly but happily. "We made him together." Recovery from childbirth took time, but Violet had never been one to lie about when there was work to be done. Within weeks, she was back to her regular activities, though now with a baby in a sling against her chest as she worked. Samuel proved to be a generally content child, happy to sleep or observe the world around him while his mother painted or helped Martha with household tasks. Vincent was a devoted father, involved in every aspect of Samuel's care. Despite the raised eyebrows this would have caused in polite society. He changed diapers and walked the floor with the baby during fussy nights and sang surprisingly sweet lullabies in his rumbling voice. As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Vincent had hired 2 ranch hands the previous year, good men who helped manage the expanding herd and maintain the property. This freed Vincent to spend more time with his family, and Violet cherished the evenings when the 3 of them would sit together on the porch, watching Samuel toddle around the yard while the sun set. When Samuel was 2 years old, Violet discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the revelation came with less surprise and more quiet joy. They knew what to expect now, felt prepared for the challenges ahead. Their second child, a daughter they named Clara Rose Whitmore, arrived the following spring during a gentle rainstorm that seemed to bless her entry into the world. She had Violet's dark hair and Vincent's blue-gray eyes, and her brother was instantly smitten with her. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Vincent's hard work and careful management paid off in steady profits and an expanding operation. They hired more help, built additional structures, improved the herd quality year by year. Violet's art evolved as well. She began receiving commissions from wealthy families back east who wanted paintings of Montana's wild beauty. Her work appeared in several galleries, and she developed a modest but respectable reputation. But her favorite pieces remained those she created purely for love. Portraits of Vincent and the children, landscapes of their valley in different seasons, sketches capturing small moments of daily life. Martha remained with them through the years, becoming as much family as employee. She was grandmother to the children in all but blood, and her practical wisdom and steady presence anchored them through challenges both large and small. As the children grew, Violet and Vincent told them the story of how their parents had met, about the dreams that had called Violet across a continent to find a home she had never seen. Samuel and Clara listened with wide eyes, asking questions about magic and destiny and whether dreams always came true. Not all dreams, Vincent told them honestly. But some dreams are more than wishes. Some dreams are callings, leading us to where we are meant to be. Your mother had the courage to follow her calling, even when it led her into the unknown. That courage brought us together and gave us this life we share. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent surprised Violet by taking her back to the boulder where he had first found her sketching all those years ago. They left the children with Martha and rode out alone, carrying a picnic lunch and Violet's sketchbook. "You ever regret it?" Vincent asked as they sat together in the spot where their story began. "Leaving everything you knew for this uncertain life." Violet looked out across the valley, seeing the ranch they had built together, thinking of their children playing safely at home, of the community they had become part of the art she had created here. Most of all, she looked at the man beside her, her partner in love, and knew her answer with absolute certainty. "Not for a single moment," she said. "This was always meant to be my home. You were always meant to be my husband." Every dream, every vision, every impossible coincidence led me exactly where I needed to be. Vincent kissed her then, tender and deep, a kiss that held 10 years of love and the promise of decades more to come. As the years continued to pass, their family grew in unexpected ways. Vincent's reputation as a fair and honest rancher spread, and young men seeking to learn the trade often came to work for him. Some stayed for seasons, others for years, but all left better prepared for the challenges of frontier life. The ranch became a gathering place for the scattered community. Violet and Vincent hosted barn dances and harvest celebrations, opened their home to neighbors facing hardship, created traditions that bound people together across the vast Montana distances. Samuel grew into a young man much like his father, quiet, strong, dedicated to the land and the work it demanded. He took naturally to ranching, spending hours riding the range with Vincent, learning everything his father could teach him about cattle and horses and the business of running a successful operation. Clara proved to have her mother's artistic temperament, showing talent with both drawing and music. Violet nurtured this creativity while also making sure her daughter understood practical skills. The frontier required versatility, and even artists needed to know how to churn butter and shoot straight. More children came in the following years. Another son named Thomas, then twin daughters Elizabeth and Emma. The ranch house expanded to accommodate the growing family, with Vincent adding rooms and a second story. What had once been a simple timber structure became a proper home, filled with laughter and love and the beautiful chaos of children. Through it all, Violet continued to paint. Her studio became her sanctuary, a place where she could process the overwhelming blessings of her life through color and form. She created a visual history of their family, documenting each stage of growth, preserving moments that might otherwise have faded from memory. On nights when Vincent found her working late, still driven by the same passion that had led her across a continent, he would wrap his arms around her from behind and rest his chin on her shoulder, watching her work. "What are you creating now?" he would ask. And Violet would explain her vision, how she was trying to capture the particular quality of autumn light on the mountains, or the expression on Clara's face when she played piano, or the way Samuel looked at the land as though reading a language only he could understand. Martha passed peacefully in her sleep when Samuel was 16, a loss that shook the entire family. She had been the thread connecting them to the ranch's history, the keeper of stories about Sarah and the early days. They buried her on a hillside overlooking the valley, with a simple stone that read Martha Hayes, beloved friend and family. The passage of time brought changes beyond their control. The frontier gradually became less wild, more settled. Railroads expanded their reach. Towns grew into small cities, and the wide open spaces that had defined Montana began filling with people seeking the same opportunities Vincent had found years before. But the Whitmore Ranch remained a constant, a thriving operation that had weathered droughts and harsh winters and economic uncertainties. Vincent's careful stewardship and Violet's steady support had created something lasting, something that would outlive them both. When Violet was 45 years old, she finally returned to Philadelphia for the first time since leaving at 23. Her father had died, and her mother was failing, and despite the difficulties involved in such a journey, Violet knew she needed to go. Vincent accompanied her, leaving the ranch in Samuel's capable hands. The city seemed smaller than Violet remembered, more cramped and artificial. The narrow streets and constant noise that had once been her entire world now felt foreign and uncomfortable. Her childhood home, which had seemed grand in memory, struck her as stuffy and dark. But seeing her mother one last time, introducing her to Vincent, sharing stories about their life and children, brought a sense of closure Violet had not realized she needed. Her mother, confined to bed but still sharp of mind, held Violet's hand and spoke words that settled something deep in Violet's heart. "I was angry when you left," her mother admitted. "I thought you were throwing away every advantage, chasing foolish dreams. But I can see now that you found what you needed. You found love and purpose. You found home. I am sorry I did not understand that sooner." "I am sorry I caused you worry," Violet said, tears streaming down her face. "But I could not have lived any other way. The dreams were too strong, the calling too clear." "We never know where life will lead us," her mother said softly. "We can only follow our hearts and hope for the best. Your heart led you true, daughter. I am proud of you." Her mother died 2 days later, passing peacefully with Violet at her bedside. They stayed for the funeral and the settling of affairs, but both Violet and Vincent felt anxious to return home. Philadelphia held memories, but Montana held their hearts. The journey back seemed longer than the journey out, but when they finally crested the ridge that revealed their valley spread below, Violet felt a sense of homecoming so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. This place, these people waiting for them, this life they had built together, this was everything. The children rushed out to greet them as they rode up to the house, all talking at once about everything that had happened during their absence. Samuel reported on the ranch with pride, having managed everything smoothly. Clara had finished 3 new paintings and learned 2 new songs. The younger children simply clung to their parents, happy to have them home. That evening, after the children had been fed and sent to bed, Violet and Vincent sat on the porch in their customary spots. The stars blazed overhead in their millions, unobscured by city lights, and the night air carried the familiar scent of sage and pine. "I am glad we went," Violet said. "But I am more glad to be home." "This will always be home," Vincent agreed. "No matter where we travel or how the world changes around us, this valley will always be ours." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the night deepen around them. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. Closer, they could hear the cattle settling and the horses shifting in the barn. The sounds of their life, their legacy. More years passed, bringing their own joys and sorrows. They celebrated weddings as their children grew and found partners of their own. They welcomed grandchildren, watching Samuel and his wife build a home on the northern section of the ranch, seeing Clara marry a teacher from Trinity and settle in town while still visiting frequently. The younger children took their own paths. Thomas became a doctor, driven by memories of Martha and a desire to serve frontier communities. The twins both married ranchers and stayed in Montana, creating their own version of the life their parents had modeled. Through all of it, Violet and Vincent remained each other's constant. They had grown from young lovers into middle-aged partners into elderly companions, and their love had deepened with each passing year. The passion of youth had mellowed into something richer and more complex, a bond forged through shared challenges, mutual respect, and unwavering commitment. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration that drew people from across Montana. The ranch filled with friends and family, neighbors and former ranch hands, people whose lives had been touched by Vincent and Violet's generosity and kindness over the decades. As Violet looked around at the gathering, at the children and grandchildren bearing their legacy forward, at the ranch that had started as an impossible dream and become a thriving reality, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Vincent found her standing alone for a moment, gazing out across the valley with tears on her cheeks. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, just as he had done countless times over 40 years. "Happy tears, I hope," he murmured. "The happiest," Violet confirmed. "I was just thinking about that young woman who sat on a boulder 22 years before we married, sketching a place she had never seen, driven by dreams she could not explain. If I could go back and tell her what awaited her, I do not think she would believe me." "Would you tell her to come anyway?" "I would tell her to ride faster," Violet said, laughing through her tears. "Not to waste a single day before finding you." They stayed at the ranch for the rest of their lives, watching seasons turn and grandchildren grow. Vincent remained active in ranch management well into his 70s, though Samuel had long since taken over daily operations. Violet painted until her hands grew too stiff with arthritis to hold a brush steady, and even then she sketched, driven by the same need to capture beauty that had defined her entire life. In their final years, they would sit together on the porch every evening without fail, weather permitting. Sometimes they talked, sharing memories and observations. Other times they simply sat in silence, hands clasped, watching the sun set over the mountains they had loved for so long. Vincent passed first, quietly in his sleep at age 79, with Violet beside him as she had been for 47 years. His loss left a hole in the world that nothing could fill, but Violet took comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the legacy they had built together, in the certainty that what they had shared transcended even death. She lived another 3 years, spending her days surrounded by family, working on one final painting when her hands would cooperate. It showed the valley as she had first seen it, empty and wild and full of promise, with two figures walking toward each other across the grassland. One from the east, one from the west, drawn together by forces neither could name but both had trusted, on a crisp autumn morning, with the aspens turning gold on the mountainsides, and the air carrying the first hint of coming winter, Violet passed peacefully in her sleep. Her children found her in the morning, a faint smile on her face, as though she had seen something wonderful. They buried her next to Vincent on the hillside where Martha rested, all three looking out over the valley they had loved. The stone was simple but perfect. Violet Preston Whitmore, beloved wife, mother, and artist, she followed her dreams home. The ranch continued under Samuel's stewardship and eventually passed to his children and his children's children. The paintings Violet had created over her lifetime were divided among the family treasured heirlooms that kept her memory alive. The house remained much as she had left it, a warm and welcoming place that seemed to hold echoes of her laughter. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light hits the valley just right, those who live there claim they can see two figures standing on the porch, hands clasped, looking out over the land they love together. Just shadows, perhaps, or tricks of the fading light. Or perhaps something more, two souls who found each other across impossible distances and refused to be parted, even by death. The story of how they met became family legend, passed down through generations. The tale of the artist who dreamed of a place she had never seen, and the rancher who had dreamed of the woman who would find him. A love story that defied logic and embraced mystery, proving that some things in this world cannot be explained, only experienced and treasured. Their great-great-grandchildren still work the ranch, still walk the same valleys and tend cattle on the same grasslands. The house has been expanded and modernized, but the bones remain the same. And in a place of honor in the main room hangs Violet's final painting, showing two figures walking toward each other across an empty valley, about to begin a journey that would span lifetimes and touch countless hearts. Because some dreams are more than mere wishes. Some dreams are prophecies, calling us toward destinies we cannot imagine but must trust. And some loves are written in the stars long before the lovers ever meet, waiting only for the courage to follow impossible visions into unknown territories, where the greatest adventures and deepest joys await those brave enough to seek them.